Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Scroll Halters, a show where entrepreneurs, creators, and marketers share their best stories and insights. This show is brought to you by Social Marketing Writing, an agency that helps businesses with their organic and paid social media marketing on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Pinterest, and increases the customer lifetime value with email marketing. Today, I'm joined by Chuck Moxley, who's a fractional CMO for B2B SaaS companies with over 30 years experience. He's also the author of the book An Audience of One, published by McGraw-Hill. Hi, Chuck. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Mitt, great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Nice to have you here. As a CMO, you probably dabble in different fields of marketing like attribution, uh, traffic generation, conversion. Is there any specific type of marketing or niche you prefer most?
Well, as somebody who focuses on B2B and SaaS, specifically, I work with kind of two different sets of types of companies. Very early stage companies that are maybe pre-launch or early launch. There, we're talking a lot about identifying and narrowing your ICP, identifying your brand foundation, sort of the foundational elements, plus your strategic narrative. And then I work with a lot of companies that are, a few years out. They've built out, they've got sort of initial product market fit, and they're trying to figure out how to scale up. So there, we're working a lot with demand gen and demand capture, and how do you drive more pipeline, basically. So those are kind of the two different areas I focus on, depending on which clients I'm working with.
Okay. And what sort of challenges do you think most SaaS companies face?
Well, I think especially when you think about those as they think about demand gen and they're trying to drive revenue, I think there's a few mistakes that a lot of SaaS CEOs make because they come at it, from past experiences, and they make some assumptions that just are sort of set them off on the wrong path. And I can give you some examples if that would be helpful.
That'll be nice, yeah.
So yeah, so when I work with a lot of SaaS companies, one of the first things I hear is we need more leads. I need more leads. I need more top of funnel leads. I've got salespeople. I've got to feed, right? And the interesting part of that is, and where a less experienced marketing team would go is like, okay, well, let's create more lead magnets. Let's create, ebooks and quizzes and things like that. But the reality is, what we see today in SaaS marketing, and the challenge is, for any given category, there are dozens of options, and dozens of options that look like they do the same thing and they might not do the same thing. So when CEOs are out there, or buyers are out there looking for tech solutions that these SaaS companies have, everything looks like the same. They look like they overlap. And so the decision process and research process, 80% of it happens before they ever engage with a salesperson or engage with the company. And it's not a one-hit wonder typically, unless you're to selling a very small purchase price, a 20 or $30 a month product. But when you get up, and I work with companies that have, average revenue of like, or average recurring revenue per client of over $100,000. Those are deals that can take 6 or 9 months. And what we see, and there's a ton of data out there that shows it takes 723 on average impressions to get a company to visit the website for the first time, and to get to a point of conversion, to get to a point of signing up for a demo or engaging with a salesperson. It can take as many as 70 touches and engagements. So the idea is, a single lead magnet, a single lead form is not really indicative. What you've really got to figure out is, and what I tell them is, you don't need leads, you need qualified prospects. You need qualified prospects who understand what you do, they've got some sense of it, and they have an interest in engaging with you and looking at your product. And so to get there, you really have to think of it as a marathon and not a sprint, not I download an ebook and now I'm ready to buy, but instead, how do I develop that, identify my ICP? How do I get top of mind before they're ready to buy? Because they may be researching for 6 months, 9 months, and when they're ready to buy and they engage with you, typically research shows they've already got three solutions in mind. They've been out listening to podcasts. They've been on websites. They've been reading blog posts. They've been reading articles. They've been in communities sharing ideas with other marketers or other people that would be peers. And so if you're not on their radar screen before they're ready to buy, you're really too late at the point that they're ready to buy and they're ready to make that move. So you've got to stay top of mind. You need a lot of engagement and a lot of different content that establishes your unique point of view, why your solution is different than everything else, and why they should care about it. So it's a process. It's a playbook, but I've built this a number of times, and I've helped grow companies from 2 million to over 50 million into exit, and it's that playbook that works.
Is there anything these similar so let's say you're a SaaS company, you've got this competitor who's very similar to you, and
Yes.
every time you introduce a feature, they're sort of copying you and releasing the same thing. What can you do with your messaging and your offer to differentiate yourself from your competitors?
Yeah, good question. If you're going head to head and go, well, we have this feature and they have that feature, and our feature is better than their feature, when you get into a feature pissing contest, I call it, you've kind of lost the battle. At that point, they'll kind of do an evaluation and they'll probably go with the price. They'll go with the one that looks lower cost if they have you on parallel. When I work with clients, and especially early stage, one of the first things we do is figure out, again, really hone in on who their ICP is, understand that ICP and what motivates them. So we go through a process of what I call know thyself, know thy competitors, and know thy customers. And in that customer research that we do, we really try to get at what are the frustrations with the current solutions, what's not working for them in the current market. And then what we try to build is a strategic narrative that instead of goes head to head says, hey, all those solutions that have been out there for a while that you were using before, they were built for a different world. They were built for what worked 5 years ago. We were built for the new world. And here's how that's radically different. If you can nail that strategic narrative and that differentiation point, you're not saying we're like them, but we're better. We're saying we're completely different. We're solving the new problem you have today, the problem that is different for you. They're solving all the other problems, and you take all the competitors, you lump them into a group of they're not interesting anymore. And you've got to now talk in terms of the new way you're solving that paradigm that better matches what's going on in their world, their frustrations. So it's not a quick process, but it's over a 2 or 3 month process. We develop this strategic narrative, and then that becomes the story that is told. It's told on your website, it's told by your salespeople, it's told by your CEO, it's what you tell in fundraising, and it becomes the thing that differentiates you. So the company, I worked with a company when I came in, like you couldn't tell from their website what they did. So we went through a strategic narrative process. And the problem was, like a lot of SaaS companies, this was a company, under $10 million that was competing with billion-dollar plus companies. And on the surface, it looked like they did the same thing, but they really had unique advantages. And so we built a new strategic narrative that helped compare them and go, unlike these other companies, you're thinking we do this. And when we started telling that story, whether we were talking to customers, prospects, investors, we quit getting the question of, well, how are you like X? How are you like Y? They quit asking because we set that up front and go, you're probably thinking we're like this. We're not. We solve this new problem and the problem that they can't solve. And here's why that's important to you based on what we learned from customers. So it works. It's a process but that's going head to head on features. You'll never win that battle, especially with AI. Everybody can catch up with everything.
Okay, and I see that you do a lot of work with positioning and getting the offer right and messaging. Do you also help them with traffic generation?
Yeah.
Anything? Okay.
Yeah, demand gen is obviously a big factor for SaaS companies, especially early stage companies. They're trying to get more people to learn about it and try to drive pipeline. So, and again, I hear this is another mistake I hear. Look, I've heard this so many times from CEOs. I want to spend $100 on something. Show me something that I can spend $100 on, and I'm going to make $1,000, and I'll do that all day long. And so what they're basically looking for is a silver bullet. And what I tell them, there is no single channel that converts, right? Because you've got all those touch points. So instead, what you've got to do is engage with more of your prospects and get in front of them. One of the things I did with one company, we started out a typical demand gen, which, by the way, everything has changed and AI is changing things faster in terms of marketing. But what worked 5 and 10 years ago is not working today. And one of the things that used to work was this gated content and that kind of concept. What we see today is, and what I did with this company was we tested it and then we removed all the gates. And what we saw was our cost per engagement dropped by 90%. And we increased pipeline by 4x just by changing that. And what was happening was, with the gate, we were stopping everybody, right? So we would have, 3,000 people come to the landing page and 10 or 20 would fill out the form. When we allowed everybody to see the content, what we saw, and we could see this from their own metrics, was instead of on average consuming a page and a half when they would come, they would go on and consume 5 pages. So what was happening was people were coming, they were getting access to the content immediately, and then they were going on to learn more about the company. That led to a 265% increase in inbound demo requests, and then that 4x increase in pipeline, just by ungating, by making it more accessible and building conversations with people and relationships.
Okay. And what sort of traffic sources work best for SaaS companies?
Well, I call it a 360 approach where you want to kind of be out there with everything, but you've got to build compelling content and compelling point of view, which is part of that messaging exercise we talked about, where you have your strategic narrative, and under that you have like three typically contrarian points of view that now you're going to build a lot of content around and start to get out there. Social in B2B SaaS and B2B in general, LinkedIn, and especially social is a great way to engage your audience. So if you've got a CEO or a founder who is comfortable posting, or you can equip with post and get them to build out their network, that's going to be one of your best ways to start to get into that engagement and get that brand recognition out there and get people to start to know about you. And there's a bunch of tools. There's some great tools out there that you can get that will help you then identify the people who are engaging with your CEO's posts, for the sellers, for the SDR team to do it, and start to go connect with those people and start to serve them up more content, get them to come back. So that works. And then the other thing that you can do from a paid standpoint, when we start to think about paid, is we typically, in B2B, especially if you've got a very narrow ICP or doing a lot of ABM, LinkedIn's going to give you the best targeting, right? Because you can target specific titles, you can target specific companies. It's very, very precise targeting. It's also very expensive. So what we've typically done is we will use ABM paid. And so we may take one of these social posts from the CEO and we'll put that out as a thought leader ad so that we can drop it into the feeds of the CEOs at the companies, or the buyers at the companies, whatever that title is that we want to reach. So that's a simple one. It's not expensive. But we'll take a pillar piece of content, an ebook, a guide, a quiz, something that's really engaging, put that out in paid ads, try to get them to come through. We drop cookies on that, and now we can retarget them with Google, which is far cheaper. I've had great success in retargeting and doing lookalike targeting on Facebook and Instagram, especially if you've got some video assets. So those are much cheaper. So we typically try to get the right person to engage with us originally, and then we try to retarget them on other channels that are less expensive and try to bring them back to additional content to the next point that we want to bring them through that funnel. And what we measure typically in that is not leads, it's not MQLs, it's not SQLs, it's first engagement, when they engage with you for the first time, as they are repeat engagements and they're coming back and doing more research, and then actual consideration. Are they visiting the type of resources on your website that are indicative of their in market and considering your product? Are they going deep in your tour, for example, or your self-guided tour? Are they on your platform page and really digging in? So we'll identify that. And then the next thing, we hope the next proof of life is an inbound demo request. I'm ready to see the product. I'm ready to engage with sales. And then obviously pipeline and close one revenue.
Okay. And I see that you place quite a big emphasis on gathering data on attribution. And are you just using Google Analytics for that? Are you using something else like Hyros or ClickMagick or something like that for that?
We use obviously attribution tools we have, and we're using Google Analytics and some of the other ad tools for the ad specifically. But what we found worked best for us was a third-party analytics platform. Specifically, we use a platform called Hockey Stack. And I loved about Hockey Stack is it took, and there's other attribution platforms out there, other platforms like that will take all the data feeds from all the ad platforms, from your web traffic, et cetera. Hockey Stack just does it particularly well, and they also get a feed from 6sense data. So they're able to identify companies. So when you're working an ABM model, which is common with a lot of companies I work with, and you're going after specific companies, you can start to see when those companies are engaging with you. We would build out reporting, and for example, if we would launch a campaign and we're targeting 500 of these ICP companies, we could see how many of those ICP companies had visited the website once, had come back for repeat engagement. We're in a research stage. So it's really good at that. And then the other thing that I enjoy about the platform is when the person makes themselves known, because all this time, remember, they're anonymous. So they've dropped a cookie. We're able to tell if they're coming from the same device or the same browser, that they're repeat visitors, et cetera. We can tell what company they're coming from. When they make themselves known, when they request a demo or download a piece of content and we get their PII, Hockey Stack is great at lighting up the entire path. And we can go back and see, oh yeah, it was 72 touches. We served so many ads to them on LinkedIn. We served so many Google ads, et cetera. And that helps us to start to figure out which elements and which pieces of content do people go through that are more likely to convert to pipeline than aren't. So we're looking at those kinds of advanced analytics typically.
Okay. One thing I wanted to visit again was you mentioned that you were having great success with organic LinkedIn, and also with ads on LinkedIn and ads on Facebook and Instagram. So my question for you is, have you tried organic Instagram or Facebook for SaaS companies and how that fared?
It's interesting. I have not. The companies that I've worked with, typically because of their tight target, because with smaller companies, you can only manage so many channels. So our first priority is always going to be LinkedIn, because you've got a business audience on there, you've got the targeting capabilities, you've got the insights. Our second channel is typically YouTube. If we've got video assets, we've got a podcast that we can repurpose, we've got interviews with the CEO, we find we can get a lot of traction from YouTube, and then we get YouTube out presenting it, and we can do paid associated with YouTube as well and get some of those video views. If they have the bandwidth, then we can look at other channels from an organic standpoint. But the Facebooks, the Instagrams, a lot of the customers or clients that I've worked with have often used those more for recruiting. So they'll do posting on that. If they've got the resources internally to manage a third or fourth channel, they'll use those channels to put out what life is like working at XYZ company and that kind of thing. They'll use that more for that than a business. Now, again, I have found paid Facebook to convert very well. I think the targeting is surprisingly good on that, especially if you can give them a customer or prospect list and they can do the lookalike targeting. And the conversion cost is phenomenal in comparison to LinkedIn. So I've been very, very positively surprised. I just haven't used it from an organic channel, typically because we just haven't had the bandwidth to do that many channels. Sometimes I'll have clients do Twitter as a follow-on, but again, each one you have to build your followers, you got to work the network, and with smaller companies, very often they don't have the resources and bandwidth to do that effectively.
Okay, and what sort of content do you usually put on YouTube?
So YouTube, again, I have clients who do podcasts. I think podcasts are a great format, because we can not only put the full length podcast episode on there, but we can take a lot of clips out of there that are hot takes. And we see those clips, if we title them right, do the right thumbnail, do some of the things right, we can see some of them take off and get hundreds of views. And in a very narrow ICP, that's awesome. Anyway, obviously it works very well for video assets for Instagram. We're obviously doing video assets. We will do interviews, we'll do new feature releases, we'll do quick tour videos, things like that. Typically quick, vertical type edits. For Facebook, from a paid standpoint, we will also do ebook offers, those kinds of offers as well, tend to work very well. I know that I get targeted a ton on them.
Okay, on Facebook, yeah. And you said that you make these videos into shorter clips? Do you republish those clips on other platforms like TikTok or Instagram or places like that?
I'll be honest, I haven't done anything with TikTok. I just haven't had the bandwidth and the type of
Okay.
budget to make sense of it. And Instagram, we haven't done them organically. We've done them paid. So we'll put them as paid in the feeds, some of those video clips, the short clips.
Because the other day I came across a post on LinkedIn from someone who works at Livestorm.
Hmm.
Do you know Livestorm?
I've heard them, yes.
It's a webinar platform, and they were saying that TikTok Send is the second highest referral for them.
I have no doubt that it would be great, and I've had people say it. The biggest challenge is bandwidth and resources. You know,
Okay.
if you've got a significant enough budget to be able to do it, and you've got the resources to build out the videos, but what I find, especially with growth firms, smaller firms, and in today's world where they don't invest, you know, they're not raising the big sums that they're willing to burn a lot of cash. If you go after too many platforms, you do none of them well because you really can't take the exact same asset and do it. You got to rethink each one and try to figure out what works best on them. You can use elements of it, but you've got to really repurpose it in the proper way. And it just takes bandwidth and resources. And, you know, on top of these that we talk about and all these unowned channels, we've got our own channels. So we got podcasts, we got newsletter, we've got, you know, emails and other things that we've got to do. So, typically with the size teams I work with and the budgets I work with, we aren't able to extend to those other channels. I'm not saying they don't work, and I'm not sure saying they're not great, but it really depends on the capacity you've got.
Okay. Yeah, I think this was great. Thank you so much for sharing all of that on how to grow a SaaS company. I'm sure my listeners will find it helpful. Can you tell people how they can find you?
Sure. The best way to find me is on LinkedIn. Try to post at least 3 times a week on there and share out insights. So definitely feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect and engage with you there. And of course, they can always visit my website at chuckmoxley.com or pick up my book on Amazon or wherever they get their books.
Yep, yep. Check out Chuck's LinkedIn profile and his website. As I mentioned, he's worked with a lot of big companies. I noticed you work with the NFL, for example. At
Yes,
Chick-fil-A and
develop
some,
marketing programs for the NFL, for all the major leagues, actually. Yeah.
and he's worked with a lot of big brands, and I'm sure he'll be able to help you out with whatever marketing problems you have. And yep, thank you so much for joining us for this episode.
Thank you, Mitt.
Thank you. Bye.